I'm Jessica Goodkind. I'm a professor in the Department of Sociology here at UNM. I do community-based mental health intervention research in partnership with refugee and immigrant communities.
What first inspired you to study community, to do community work, and work closely with refugee and immigrant populations?
Well, actually, before I went to graduate school, I worked in a refugee camp in Thailand for 2 years. So this was in the early 1990s. And I was working with refugees who were coming to resettle in the United States. And after spending 2 years working with families there, I came back to the United States and I traveled around the country visiting a lot of the families who I'd worked with in Thailand. And what I saw was, even though they had overcome incredibly difficult circumstances, having fled violence and persecution and war and survived many years in refugee camps, that families were coming here and facing so many stressors in the United States. And I was really interested in thinking about how to partner with refugees to create communities that are more responsive to their needs, that are more welcoming. Because the other thing I really saw was that all of the people I had worked with in Thailand, they brought so many strengths, so much knowledge and experience to this country, but their knowledge and experience wasn't being valued here. So I really wanted to create that space. So I actually went to graduate school in community psychology. So even though I'm in the Department of Sociology, my work is very interdisciplinary. And community psychology is a field where we think about mental health and well-being and how to promote the mental health and well-being of individuals and families and communities. But we think about doing that by creating broader social change. So thinking about what are the factors in people's environments that are impacting their mental health and how can we work together to change those. And another really important value of community psychology is seeing people as experts in their own lives. So rather than saying, I see I'm working with people experiencing these challenges or problems that I'm going to fix. Community psychology really sees how do we partner with people who are the experts in their lives and help them to access additional resources and build on their strengths. So it fits really well with a community engaged research perspective.
Could you share a little bit more about what kind of research do you do currently?
Sure. Yeah. So the research that I've been doing really since I came to UNM, which was in 2004, is partnering with refugee and now immigrant communities. And together, what we do is identify what are the stressors that people are facing, what are their strengths, and then work together to create programs to address those. So I started a program actually for my dissertation in graduate school called the Refugee Wellbeing Project. And I brought it here to UNM and started it in 2006 here. So it's been going almost 20 years here at UNM. And it involves teaching a 2-semester class where undergraduate and graduate students are in the classroom for a few months learning about the experiences and backgrounds of refugees and immigrants. And then they partner together with newcomer families, refugees and immigrants, and the program centers around learning circles where we meet one evening a week and bring together students and refugees and immigrants to learn from each other and do what we call cultural exchange. And then as families get to know students, they're also officially paired together to work as partners where they spend at least 6 to 8 hours a week with each other for 6 months. And the students and families together mobilize resources to address the goals and unmet needs of refugee and immigrant families. So it could be anything from housing to employment to legal issues to healthcare. So that's the main program that I've been running. And we've done a lot of research around this intervention for the last 20 years. Mostly funded by the National Institutes of Health, the National Institute of Mental Health, and the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities. And we've looked both at the impact of the Refugee and Immigrant Wellbeing Project on the mental health of refugees and immigrants. And we've also looked at various other social determinants of mental health And our current study, we have been interviewing a group of about 600 refugees and immigrants for the last 3.5 years. So we've interviewed and surveyed them 7 times, and we've been looking at how their well-being has changed over time. We started right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, looking at the role of community-based organizations in promoting their well-being, as well as structural interventions, so differential access to policy and relief efforts. And that's in partnership with 5 community-based organizations here in New Mexico, which are Centro Savila, the New Mexico Immigrant Law Center, New Mexico Dream Team, United Voices for Newcomer Rights, and Encuentro.
Beyond COVID, have you seen any evolution in the change of the needs when you started this project to nowadays?
That's a good question. Well, I think that it has become harder and harder to be a newcomer in the United States in the years since I've been doing this work. And that is because, similar to what all people are experiencing in this country, there's been a shrinking of the safety net, a shrinking of support for people who come here, people who are resettled as refugees have been determined to be fleeing a well-founded fear of persecution or violence. And it used to be that we provided 5 years of support and assistance for people to learn English and begin their new lives. And that has been shortened to about 3 months right now. And in general, for newcomers, I think that in some ways at the federal level, structurally, it's been much less supportive. Although I also have seen in Albuquerque, in the time since I've been back here, that there's growing community-based support and community-based mobilization that really welcomes newcomers. So that's important.
How do the community get involved with this project? Like if they want to volunteer or assist you with the needs, or how can they participate in your project?
Well, we have a lot of people who are interested in getting involved. If they're students, I always recommend that they take the 2-semester class. For other community members, there are multiple ways with our learning circles that we run 1 week or 1 time per week. We have adults, we have teenagers, we have kids, we have toddlers. And so we always accept volunteers who are interested in helping with the learning circles, where they get to engage in learning from newcomer families and maybe helping kids with their homework and other things that we do there. Also, if people want to help us fundraise, we always appreciate that. Actually, one of the things I should mention is that one of our partner organizations, United Voices for Newcomer Rights, is an organization that was actually founded by former Refugee and Immigrant Wellbeing Project families and students who really wanted to create a nonprofit organization that was led by people who, again, are from the newcomer community, so have the expertise, the lived experience, the language and cultural knowledge, and that provides support to newcomers all year round. So they're our partner organization in running the Refugee and Immigrant Wellbeing Project Learning Circles and Advocacy right now. So it's really a true partnership together. So they're another great organization to get involved with.
Your research shows that your organization reduces psychological distress and strengthens social connections. What do you think makes the program so effective?
So I think that, for many years, research and intervention with refugees focused on past trauma, because of course, people who come here as refugees probably have experienced violence and difficult circumstances. But we know that not everybody develops PTSD or any kind of lasting mental health problem as a result of trauma. For many people, it's the stressors of beginning a new life, right? And, when people leave their home country, whether as a refugee or an immigrant, they're often leaving behind family and friends. They're losing valued social roles that they had in their community, where people look to them for whatever kinds of knowledge or support they provided. So one of the things that as a community psychologist I know is that creating those valued social roles for people, making sure that people have social support, feeling like they have the opportunity to get to know people already in the United States and that people are welcoming them here and want them here. I think all of those things have a huge impact on people's distress. But it's not just that welcoming or valuing people's knowledge and experience. That's really important, but also access to resources, right? And that's something that is challenging for people even born in this country often, to navigate the complex institutional bureaucracies that we have, but especially for newcomers who are not familiar with the systems here and may not speak English. Having somebody to partner with you, to help you just figure out how to apply to college, how to look for a new job, how to negotiate with a landlord who's not wanting to return your security deposit. All of those stressors, we know there's a huge growing body of research that the social determinants of health have a big impact on people's mental health and well-being. So I think that's why our project is so successful, but also because it does build on people's strengths. And so it's something that people want to do. They enjoy doing, participating in it. And many people who were participants in the program go on to be staff, community advocates, facilitators. Many of the staff at United Voices for Newcomer Rights, almost all of them actually, are either former newcomer or student participants in the project.
So, community based participatory research is at the heart of your work. What does genuine power sharing look like between universities and communities?
So that's something that I think about a lot. And I think, first of all, it really means shared decision making. So that means a shared work to identify what are the priorities for the research. How are we going to do the research? Who's going to be involved in the research? And also a huge part of that is funding. So it's really sharing the resources. So even with a lot of the work I do, some of the grants that I get, they come to UNM. And then we have subcontracts with our community partners. But we also partner with our community-based organization partners to help them write grants where they get the grant, and then we do the research together. So part of it is really making sure that there's shared control of the funds and shared access to the funding for the research. And then another huge thing that relates to the funding is, one of the reasons the funding is so important is that so that both academic partners and community partners have the time, the dedicated time to participate in the research. Because if we really want to be involved together, then everybody needs time that is paid for outside of their busy schedules to be able to design the research questions, to analyze the data together, to interpret that data, to share the findings. So one of the things that we do that I also think is really important is that we analyze a lot of our data in the primary language of participants and of community partners. So all of our, for example, qualitative data with Spanish-speaking immigrants, we analyze that in Spanish. That means that when we have the meetings to analyze that data, they're accessible to everybody, no matter what their first language is. And we always have interpretation. We also have our research team meetings in multiple languages. So we want everyone to speak the language that they may most feel comfortable speaking. And then we'll interpret for whoever needs interpretation. So I think that that's really, really important. And that also shows people that we are all committed to everyone's full participation, even though it might take twice as long. It's really important. And similar to that, we always present together. So when we go to conferences, we never present just academic partners, like just faculty or grad students. We always have community partners too. Last fall in 2024, we went to Uruguay to a conference, and we specifically picked that because we knew that we could present our work in Spanish. And that was the first language of many of our community partners. So they could present in Spanish and English. And so that was really exciting. But we really prioritize that in all the work that we do.
What other languages or cultures, do you have?
So the main other newcomer groups that we have in Albuquerque and that we work with in the Refugee and Immigrant Wellbeing Project are people from Afghanistan. And so they're Dari and Pashto speakers, people from Iraq and Syria who are Arabic speakers, And then people from the Great Lakes region of Africa, which includes Burundi, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so primarily Swahili speakers, Kirundi, Kinyarwanda, and actually most people from the Great Lakes region speak 3, 4, or 5 languages. But the main languages that we have capacity are Swahili, Kirundi, and Kinyarwanda for Great Lakes Africans.
Is it difficult to get interpreters or translators for that type of work?
It is. I mean, I think that's, not anymore because now most of our partners and staff are community members from those countries who speak those languages. But there are a few people who have those skills. That's true. And we've also realized in terms of analyzing qualitative data, that's one reason we don't analyze data directly in like Dari or Swahili is that it's actually really expensive to transcribe audio content from those languages. And then, of course, we have fewer people who have the capacity to work together to analyze it. But I will say that we've spent a lot of time working on issues of translation, also for our survey questions, and making sure that when we ask about people's mental health, when we ask about their social support, that we're asking in ways that are meaningful to people and that are valid. And so that is a big learning experience in and of itself, because we might be, trying to translate certain questions in multiple languages, and we find out that there's either fewer words or way more words for that same word. And then it leads to conversations where we really think about what are we asking about. And we've actually written several papers that think about how we measure distress in culturally valid and contextually valid ways. So thinking about what are the different ways that we need to ask questions for people from Afghanistan, Burundi, all these different countries, and knowing that not only do sometimes certain questions not make sense, but even we found with Spanish speakers that certain measures that are widely used in the United States underreport, or that most people underreport their distress because of the way that the questions are asked.
What have been some of the biggest lessons or surprises you've learned from collaborating directly with refugee and immigrant families?
Well, I think one of the biggest lessons, I guess, and this really started during my time working in a refugee camp in Thailand, was just seeing how people who face so many challenges and hard times are able to persevere and not give up, and that we take a lot for granted. People who are born in the United States take a lot for granted, I think. And that's not something new to me, but I think it's something really important. But I will say in like the turbulent times that we've faced with the COVID-19 pandemic and many other things, that often refugee and immigrant families, they provide a lot of stability and wisdom because many of them have been through really difficult circumstances before, and they know that these are things that we will survive and that we can figure out together how to do that. And I think newcomers are some of the most generous and giving people. And so that is very infectious with the students that we work with. I think students really learn and see like, wow, people are coming here with limited resources, a lot of challenges, but they will stop and make you a meal, share a meal, help you when you need help. And I think that's an important reminder for all of us that sometimes we need to slow down and remember what are the most important things in life, and how we connect with each other and support each other are the most important things.
Talking about your teaching, you emphasize hands on community engagement. What impact do you see this having on students' understanding of social inequality and resilience?
Yeah, well, I think that it's one thing to read about social inequality in a textbook or talk about it or discuss it in a class or even watch a film about it. But when you are partnering with people who are experiencing that in their everyday lives, you understand it in a very different way. And so I think that's why I think hands-on learning is so important, not only because we make positive change in our community, which is really important for the university, but also that students learn in a much deeper and more meaningful way, and they remember what they learned because they've had those lived experiences with people that they're partnering with. I would also say that over the last 20 years that I've been teaching the class here where students partner with refugee and immigrant families, that more and more of my students are also refugees or immigrants themselves, or their parents are refugees and immigrants. And I think that a lot of those students have told me that it's a really empowering experience, not only to be able to help other families who have gone through what they have experienced, but also that they're able to understand and analyze their own experience growing up in a really different way and have this perspective on it that helps them understand their parents better, understand their communities better, think about how we can work together to create broader social change. Because that's a big part of our class and the learning circles together is not just helping people access resources and the everyday challenges, but realize that together we can understand what are these broader social factors and social structures that are negatively impacting people's well-being and change them together. And so for students, seeing that the ability to create change together also has a big impact on their learning.
Can anyone take your class? For example, a community member as a non-degree student could take your class, or is only for UNM students?
No, anybody could take the class. I intentionally don't have any prerequisites, so there are no courses that people would have had to already take. And I've actually had several students who have taken the class as non-degree seeking UNM students. Both of the ones that I can think of directly were older people who were taking advantage of UNM's opportunity to take classes for I don't know, I think it's $5 or $15, but actually it was amazing having people take the class who had a lot of life experience themselves, a lot of connection to resources, and more time in a way. So they have really had a huge impact on newcomer families. I think really learned a lot themselves and also been mentors to some of the other students in the class. So that's been really nice.
If another university or city wanted to replicate your model, what are the key ingredients they would need to have in place to succeed?
So actually, that's something that we've thought a lot about, and we've created a manual that for any community or university who wants to replicate the project. And some people have started to do it, and they've really adapted it in different ways. Like one university adapted it to focus on medical students and refugee families, or actually specifically torture survivors. So it's a very flexible model. I think the key ingredients are one, to really start by getting to know the community where you are. Who are the newcomer communities? What are their goals? What are their strengths? Finding some partners who want to do the work together, a university partner, maybe community organizations. Although even if there's not community organizations working with newcomers in a community, when I started the project here and when I started it first as my dissertation in the year 2000, there were really no community-based organizations working with refugees besides Catholic Charities, who was doing refugee resettlement here. So it's also just finding community members who really believe in the vision and then figuring out how to adapt the model to best fit the needs of the communities that you're working with.
From a policy perspective, what change would make the biggest difference in improving the lives of newcomer communities in New Mexico?
So that's a great question. There are a lot of policy changes. I would say, one of the things in a paper that we've just submitted for publication looks at the impact of family separation and family reunification on newcomer well-being. We published another paper in 2018 that looked among refugees specifically, and we found that family separation was one of the strongest determinants of people's psychological distress. And we've just done some research here with about 600 Latinx and African newcomers where we found the same thing. So part of the policies that really will make a difference are the United States returning to immigration policies that prioritize family reunification, that recognize the challenges that many people face and have more support for newcomers. Given, the current policy context where we are, some of those things might not be immediately happening, But another really important area of policy that we're partnering with the state of New Mexico right now on studying and addressing is workforce development. So for many newcomers, they're coming with advanced degrees, highly skilled people, but often have a hard time putting those skills or their certification or degrees to use here because of our requirements for certification here or language barriers. And the state of New Mexico recognizes this and recognizes that newcomers, refugees, and immigrants can meet a lot of the workforce shortage areas that our state faces. So they are really prioritizing understanding what are the skills and degrees that newcomers are bringing here and what kinds of supports do they need to put in place to help people navigate the systems to recertify if they need to learn English if they need to get certified in a new related field. So we're doing a survey right now with refugees and immigrants all over the state to understand those needs that the state is funding. And we're also doing in-depth focus groups with refugees and immigrants. And then the state is going to use that data to shape policy in the Department of Workforce Development, the Office for New Americans. Yeah.
Looking ahead, what questions or challenges in refugee and immigrant well being do you most hope to explore next? And what gives you hope in this work?
One of the areas that I think is really important to explore, and we've received tentative approval from the National Institute of Mental Health to fund, is to continue following these same 600 people that we've been interviewing and surveying for the past 3.5 years for 4 more years to really understand how, as our policies and the political context and the social context for refugees and immigrants change, how is that impacting people's mental health and well-being? And especially, we're going to also focus even more on the role of community-based organizations because we know, and there's a growing body of literature that looks at the important role that community-based organizations play in helping newcomers to navigate systems, learn the language, access mental health, specialized mental health interventions if they need them, to build that trust and support. So I think understanding that even more is really important because at the same time that we're working towards larger structural policy level changes, we need to think about how we as communities can continue to mobilize and support refugees and immigrants. So I think that's a really important area for future research. And I think that is what gives me hope. Seeing how many people do care in our communities, students, other community members, for getting to know newcomers and helping them navigate new systems, and especially the hope and the strength that newcomers themselves are bringing and the perseverance they have, like no matter what challenges they're facing, to keep going and to keep supporting their families and their communities.
Is there anything else you would like to add?
Well, I think I could add, and I think maybe there was a question about this, but that I think another thing that we've thought a lot about and written a paper about as well is how mental health interventions can be culturally appropriate for multiple cultures at the same time. So a lot of times, and in the field of, mental health, a lot of people think about for every kind of mental health intervention, we need to adapt it specifically for every different cultural group. And I do think that's really important to understand the specific culture of different groups and make sure that interventions are relevant and appropriate for them. But also, one of the things that we've thought about in the Refugee and Immigrant Wellbeing Project is we bring together people from multiple linguistic and cultural backgrounds. So we've thought about what are the factors that can make a mental health intervention culturally appropriate for multiple groups. And so part of that we talk about is really how do we recognize the sort of common factors that people experience in their lives? How do we decenter an emphasis on US culture and really focus on the strengths that people are bringing? And so I think there's a lot that we can do to think about what that really means to have mental health interventions that are culturally appropriate without being culturally specific.
Could you tell us more about your students and how they engage in the type of work you do?
Sure. Yeah. So I think for undergraduate students, they usually first connect with my research and this work through taking the 2-semester course as part of the Refugee and Immigrant Wellbeing Project. But many of them go on to then get involved in our research because they're really excited from their involvement with newcomer families, and they want to see the other side of it, how we are looking at the impacts of the Refugee and Immigrant Wellbeing Project on people's mental health and well-being. For graduate students, I think it's been so important to have graduate student involvement in the project. So I co-teach the 2-semester class every year with a graduate student. So they they give so much of their knowledge and expertise. And actually, the graduate student co-teaching with me this year was an undergraduate in the course several years ago and decided to go to graduate school to further her study and focus on immigrant mental health and well-being. But many graduate students are involved in the research with the project, and that is amazing. Many graduate students themselves who have lived experience as immigrants or refugees, or the children of immigrants or refugees, and they bring their knowledge, their perspective to the research that we do together, to the community partnerships, and also as a space for them to make connections with community-based organizations and community members to think about their own research that they want to conduct.
Is there any challenges that you're facing currently, and how are you overcoming them in the type of work you do?
Yeah, I think, in refugee and immigrant communities, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty right now. And that makes it more important than ever to connect with families, to give them the chance to form relationships with trusting people in the United States so that they see there are people that care about newcomers, that want refugees and immigrants here, that want them to succeed here. And it's harder to navigate resources right now. So I think the work that our students are doing, that our community partners are doing, are more important than ever. And a lot of refugees and immigrants that we've been interviewing over the last 4 years, every 6 months or so, talking with them, say they also really appreciate even the interviews and surveys themselves, because they feel like we're checking in with them and seeing how they're doing. And so I think we've been able to, over the last 3.5 years, stay in touch with 87% of the people who started in our study. And if you know from longitudinal research, to have been collecting data at 7 time points over 3.5 years and still have 87% of people answering our interviews and surveys and talking with us, that's especially people who are new to this country and sometimes are moving around a lot. I think that really shows that we've built trust and established relationships. And it's also a way that we can share information and resources with families. So I think those are some of the ways that we just think about keep doing the work that we're doing, and being extra mindful that it's challenging work. And I guess I would add to that too, that one of the things I think is really important about community-based participatory research that people don't always talk about is that it's not just cognitive work, it's emotional work, right? And so when, as academics, we think about research, we're thinking about, oh, what are we finding? And we're excited about the creation of knowledge together. But it's emotional, especially when we're talking about mental health, when we're talking about partnering with refugees and immigrants who've had difficult experiences, including our graduate students and undergraduate students and community partners. Then we have to make sure that we're thinking about how this research has an emotional impact on people. So how do we create that support and space? But in a way, I think having these spaces where we talk about these issues, recognize them, and we're doing something about them together is really healing and helpful for refugees and immigrants, for students. But I just want to mention that it's important to think about and to take the time to do that and not rush over or gloss over the real emotional impact that research has. I'm Jessica Goodkind. I'm a professor in the Department of Sociology here at UNM.